Chapter 2. In front of Xiaochi was a digital display that only he could see. On the display was the original host's current body temperature, heart rate, blood pressure, surrounding temperature, and so on. Of particular interest was a conspicuous bar divided into two colors, red and blue. The blue bar represented the regret level, while the red bar represented the goodwill level, both with a maximum value of 100 points. The blue bar was currently stuck at 9 points, while the points of the red bar were steadily decreasing due to Xiaochi's line of "Does it cost you?" Xiaochi sighed, "Why is it that people don't like to hear the truth?" The system wanted to roast him a little, but held back. Yang Beiwa was disappointed, saying, "Xiaocheng, how could you talk like that?" Xiaochi didn't panic, and simply replied amicably, "Old Yang, don't misunderstand. My meaning was that my big brother is just looking out for us. With a car, our lives will be so much easier. I don't have a need for it, but you could use it to drive to work, right? It'll give you a lot more face in front of your colleagues too." His attitude was very pleasant, as if his prior remark that was full of was simply a statement of fact. Seeing the 2-point increase in the goodwill level, the system thought, he's giving him the stick followed by the carrot. His means aren't bad. Yang Beiwa calmed himself down. This child had been spoiled rotten since young and didn't know the impact of his words. He feared that he completely hadn't realized just how hurtful his prior words were. Thinking of this, Yang Beiwa gathered the patience of a father dealing with their own child, and coaxed him, saying, "Xiaocheng, cars are consumables. Have you ever thought about how much it costs to own a car? How much it would cost to pay for gasoline each month, how much it would cost to buy a parking lot, have you thought about it? Is this something we afford right now? I'll earn money to provide for you." Cheng Yuan nonchalantly placed his hands behind his back, his smile sincere and gentle enough to make one's heart melt. "My demos are almost complete. When they're done, they'll earn us some money." Yang Beiwa helplessly replied, "How many times have I told you, this isn't a proper job? But I like music. Just because you like it doesn't mean it can put food on the table. Never mind, let's not talk about this." Yang Beiwa generously gave in. "We shouldn't quarrel. All right, let's not talk about that." Cheng Yuan walked forward, closing the gap between him and Yang Beiwa. He gently said, "Actually, I was also thinking that we can use this car to fetch your mom and dad. Mom, Dad, and third sister are coming to visit next week. When they come, you can even drive them over to Xiao Yan's school to bring her out for a meal. The last time Xiao Yan came over, didn't she also ask when you were going to buy a car?" Those two matters just so happened to poke at Yang Beiwa's weak spot. He was silent. As he spoke, Cheng Yuan raised his head to look up at Yang Beiwa. Upon meeting his burning gaze, Yang Beiwa's heart skipped a beat. It was currently winter. Under the light of the evening street lamps, Cheng Yuan let out a breath of white fog. In the haze of white mist, his fair and radiant face was enveloped in an exquisite halo of light that could move people's hearts. The circle of fluffy feathers lining the hood of his white down jacket moved slightly in the evening wind, sticking to his slender, white porcelain neck, gently tickling it. All at once, he felt a squeezing, burning sensation in his heart. Meanwhile, Xiaochi's attention was on translucent card currently displayed on the operating board in front of him. Its contents were as follows. Name, Beauty Halo, Trial Edition. Duration, 10 minutes. Quantity, 1. Quality, excellent. Type, single use only. Points required, 0, free trial. Description, your simple smile is more radiant than the shine of gold-coating silver egg fried rice, more warm than a simmering pot of pork broth soup, more tender than the meat bursting out of a freshly snapped crab leg, and more fascinating than the red oil oozing out of the yolk of a salted duck egg. No delicacy can compare to your smile, illuminated by the dim lights. Nice metaphor. Xiaochi asked, curious, did the person in charge of writing these descriptions come from a family of chefs? The system was silent for a moment. 09 is the one of the first generation ACE. It started out as data, it just likes studying recipes. Xiaochi found these words to be a little strange. Started out as data? Is there such a thing as turning into data? Before he could ask further, the system butted in with a reminder, Mr. Qi, your task. Xiaochi, oh. Seeing Xiaochi gather himself once more, the system felt slightly gratified. When he first took on Xiaochi, he'd immediately noticed that this new host was a little more difficult to handle. After receiving and reading the information of this world, Xiaochi pondered to himself for quite a while. His very first question was, later when we see him, can I directly run that surnamed Yang over with a car? The system. Xiaochi said, no, we're just discussing a possibility. The system said, Mr. Qi, you're dealing with a living, breathing human being here. Xiaochi made a show of being earnest, oh. But it'd be an accident, no? It wouldn't be intentional. The system tried to reason with him, Mr. Qi, the laws of this world aren't very different from those in your original world. Those who purposefully attempt to harm others will be thrown in jail. Furthermore, if you run your target over, how are you planning on leaving this world? Leaving the task world depended on the regret level. Only when the regret level reached 100 points, would the host be able to leave the current world, and be sent to the next task world. The system brought up the regret level in order to dissuade Xiaochi from this immoral idea. Who knew that Xiaochi would seriously start to analyze in a reasonable and justified manner? It's said that people regret the most in the moment before death. The system. Xiaochi continued, even if he doesn't die and only becomes disabled, he'll still have a long life ahead of him to regret. The system, you can shut up now. Xiaochi understood the system's silence. He sighed, fine. You, this little comrade, really don't have a sense of humor. However, the system could hear the clear disappointment in Xiaochi's voice. For this reason, the system could not rest assured, and even thoroughly looked over the information he had on Xiaochi once more. Right, Xiaochi definitely was an actor, not some convict with a criminal record. Even though he had enough black material to cover the heavens, bad-tempered, smoked in public places and led teens astray, uncultured and unashamed, on bad terms with his parents, and had dirty pie dealings with all kinds of old men, etc., his messy matters too numerous to count, most were just rumors, and it was hard to tell the truth from the lies. After simply filtering out the tabloids, the system thought, it should be fine, this host just has a somewhat independent, unconventional personality, with some slight mental issues. With some kindness and gentle guidance, there shouldn't be any problems. Anyway, Xiaochi had done quite well so far, putting the free skill card to good use. A quick check showed that Yang Beiwa's goodwill level, which had been at a steady decline, already showed signs of rejuvenation. Every new host was liable to 12 free single-use skill cards. These props had numerous different functions, but they could only be used once. If after trying them out, the host found them useful, they could enter the system's shop and exchange the goodwill points of the host for props to be used in various situations as needed. Like right now. Looking at Cheng Yuan, Yang Beiwa lightly swallowed. He'd known that Cheng Yuan was attractive, but no matter how attractive the person, after a while, anyone would get accustomed to it. But just now, when he looked at Cheng Yuan, he'd regained the itchy feeling in his heart from when they'd first started dating. The snow-white rabbit that had been lovingly raised since young raised its round, black eyes, attentively staring at him with eyes full of fascination. Such an outstanding person wholeheartedly relied on him and thought only of him. This was only right. Yang Beiwa enjoyed this feeling of being back on track. Holding back a smile, he asked, "You still remember my cousins called Xiao Yan?" Cheng Yuan replied with no small amount of pride, "Of course I remember. If it has to do with you, I remember everything. In that moment, Yang Beiwa felt the urge to kiss him. But out of the corner of his eye, he just happened to catch a glimpse of Xiao Lu from the photocopy room next door on his way out, twirling his keys as he exited from the revolving door of the company and discussing with two other colleagues where they would be going for barbecue tonight. Remaining calm and collected, Yang Beiwa angled his body, quietly blocking Cheng Yuan from view. His hand, which originally had been raised halfway to stroke Cheng Yuan's face, was also lowered and naturally shoved into his pocket. Next time when you want to add something to our home, don't forget to discuss it with me first. This home belongs to the two of us, doesn't it? Qi Zhaokai sneered internally. This home belongs to the two of us? Discuss? The double bed that could fit your entire family, did you ever discuss it with me? However, Cheng Yuan wouldn't have thought of such things. According to his personality, he would just know that Yang Beiwa had silently agreed. They could keep the car. Cheng Yuan's eyes brightened, and his loving gaze towards Yang Beiwa became even more intense. Yang Beiwa smiled and offered, "I'll drive." Cheng Yuan volunteered, saying, "You've worked hard the entire day, I'll drive." He pulled open the back door of the car, and playfully bent his knee, "Boss, please get on first. I'll go throw away some trash." Yang Beiwa laughed, and readily sat inside. As he looked over the car's interior, he couldn't quite conceal the envy in his eyes. When would he be able to be like Cheng Jian, able to just casually gift someone a car? Cheng Yuan, carrying a nearly empty mineral water bottle, ambled over to the trash bin by the side of the road. Yang Beiwa spent most of his time facing a computer screen, so his eyesight wasn't the best. He didn't see the cigarette butt floating in the water bottle. When Qi Zhaokai tossed the bottle into the recycling bin, the empty bottle collided with the inside of the bin, making a soft noise of crumpling plastic. Qi Zhaokai asked the system, "Do you see it now?" The system, N. Cheng Yuan majored in vocal music. He had always lovingly protected his vocal cords, staying far away from smoking and drinking. Qi Zhaokai had smoked half a cigarette. Even though he'd used chewing gum to hastily cover it up, the smell of cigarette smoke still lingered in his mouth and on his cuffs. However, his current lover hadn't noticed any irregularities at all. He hadn't asked even a single question. Of course, this was just a casual test by Qi Zhaokai and didn't confirm anything. However, in his opinion, this was just one of the small signs of Cheng Yuan's tragic fate. Upon returning to the car, as Cheng Yuan was putting on his seatbelt, he said, "When Mom and Dad arrive, let's go pick them up from the train station together." Yang Beiwa visibly froze for a second. Of course, Cheng Yuan wouldn't notice anything strange about Yang Beiwa, and so continued to speak, "My driving is very steady. When the time comes, we can bring Mom and Dad to fetch Xiao Yan, and then bring them to visit Yunzi Temple, and go to the suburbs to soak in the hot springs." Yang Beiwa replied uncomfortably, "Let's talk about this some other time." Cheng Yuan, like a little trumpet, enthused, "Then I'll play my new demo for you. You'll be my first listener, how about it?" Yang Beiwa was very happy he'd changed the subject. He went along with it, replying, "Let's hear it then." Cheng Yuan dug out his phone, tapping it a few times. Melodious and pure music drifted out of the loudspeaker, incredibly pleasing to the ear. Yang Beiwa had been busy working for the entire day, and the music that flowed into his ears seemed to soothe his tense nerves. Sitting back against the comfortable leather seat, he drifted off to sleep. The system couldn't help but remind him, "Mr. Qi, you don't need to use skill cards so frequently." Qi Zhaokai had just used a hypnosis card on Yang Beiwa that would last half an hour. Qi Zhaokai himself wasn't as stingy, "I'm just trying it out. Anyways, it's not like goodwill points are hard to earn." This judgment wasn't wrong. A person's goodwill towards another was naturally always in flux. When couples argued, their goodwill to one another would sink straight to the lowest, to the point that they'd be itching to just strangle the other to death. On the other hand, in their most passionate moments, it would be like blending oil in honey, and their goodwill value would naturally steadily increase. Just now Qi Xiaokai's excellent techniques had brought Yang Beiwa's goodwill level back up to 72 points, exactly the same as where they had started. Qi Xiaokai summarized, for a car that didn't cost him anything, his goodwill level directly dropped by 14 points. The system, weren't the last 10 points lost because you went and provoked him? Qi Xiaokai continued his analysis, with the beauty halo card that lasted 10 minutes and some gentle coaxing, the goodwill level returned to its original value. A beauty halo card that lasts this long only costs 5 goodwill points. Looking at it like this, goodwill points really are easy to grind. The system. Just now, had Qi Xiaokai deliberately provoked Yang Beiwa in order to test the extent to which the goodwill points would drop? Also, the word grind gave the system a bad feeling. Qi Xiaokai said, moving forward, as long as Yang Beiwa's goodwill level is passable, it's fine. We've got an extra 12 goodwill points to spare, so help me take a look at the shop. Let's see what we can buy. The system was shocked. In order to leave the worlds quickly, his previous hosts had all persistently followed the target's every whim, first and foremost grinding the goodwill level up to 100 points before doing anything else. After all, no one knew if insufficient goodwill points would have an impact on the progress of the task. This was the first time the system had seen such a reckless warrior who dared to remain at the passing mark right from the start. The system flipped through the store. The things you can buy with 10 goodwill points would be a 30-minute-long beauty halo, a 5-minute-long karate black belt buff, a 1-hour-long painlessness buff, a 5-minute-long heartthrob halo. Qi Xiaokai listened carefully as the system went over it once. Buy the first one. After a successful purchase, he asked, is there a longer-lasting heartthrob halo? The system said, there is. The longest lasts 1 hour, and costs 40 goodwill points. Qi Xiaokai muttered to himself, then I'll have to save up some more. From Qi Xiaokai's tone, the system got the impression that to him, Yang Beiwa was like a meat-producing pig. Today he'd chop off the front legs, the next day he'd chop off some pork belly. After he chopped some meat off, it'd grow back, and when it did, he'd chop it off again, in a cycle without an end. The slightly terrified system said, the remaining 2 points can only buy a few small props and adult products. Qi Xiaokai, oh ho! The system, Mr. Qi, we are proper systems. Qi Xiaokai didn't say anything, but he was evidently amused. The system was incensed by his amusement, to the point where his data even showed some slight fluctuations. We don't provide that kind of service. Adult products refers to small physical props that can enhance relationships, like flower bouquets, river lanterns, fireworks, and so on. Qi Xiaokai said, get a firework. A firework costs 3 points. Qi Xiaokai simply said, okay, one then. The system. Qi Xiaokai, what are you so stunned for? The one who'll be failing is me. The system helplessly thought, of course it's you, who else would it be, me? After a successful purchase, the clear sound of a bell rang out, indicating that the item had been placed in storage. Qi Xiaokai waited for a long time, where's the fireworks? The system replied, the target, was still lying there like a corpse, dead to the world. Who said it was for him? Qi Xiaokai said, now, light it up. The system was a little confused, but did as instructed. An 8-core firework burst into the sky, drifting down like a snowline, falling like a shooting star, dyeing the dark dome of the night sky with a moving tapestry of light. The firework had exploded in the distance. Light traveled faster than sound, so as the light, like a string of pearls, scattered into the night sky. Qi Xiaokai suddenly opened his mouth and said to the system, this is for you. His words hadn't finished before, with a loud bang, the noise of the firework exploding arrived, late. The system stared at the dissipating stars in slight shock. The rear-view mirror of the car reflected Qi Xiaokai's face. He was smiling. Even though Qi Zhaokai was using Cheng Yuan's face, his true smile bore no resemblance whatsoever to Cheng Yuan's innocence. His peach blossom eyes were curved, showing 3 parts evilness mixed with 7 parts indifference and laziness. It had its own intoxicating charm, an attractiveness that made it impossible to tear one's eyes away. Qi Zhaokai said to the system, "From today onwards I'll be troubling you, please take care of me." The system. Even though he was a little touched, the system inexplicably felt that that sentence wasn't quite right. It felt a bit like the last meal of a death row inmate before he was sent off to the firing squad. Very quickly, the system realized the problem. This isn't the road to Yang Beiwa's house. Qi Zhaokai replied as if it were the most obvious thing in the world, "Of course not. If not, why else would I have hypnotized him?" The system. Qi Zhaokai glanced at the inbuilt GPS, confirming his destination before continuing, "There's a place I want to visit." Chapter 3. After 40 minutes, Qi Zhaokai arrived at his destination. Just outside the car, 3 big words "Bamang Public Cemetery" were clearly visible. As the system took a second look around at the dark, windy surroundings in the moonless night, Qi Zhaokai turned off the headlights, plunging the surroundings into darkness. He asked warily, "What are you planning?" Qi Zhaokai pulled up the handbrake and killed the engine. He looked over at the sleeping form of Yang Beiwa reflected in the rearview mirror and laughed menacingly, "He he he." The system. Qi Zhaokai asked, "Excuse me, how much for a razor blade?" The system was expressionless, "A police report is free." Qi Zhaokai continued, "If there aren't any razor blades, wires are also fine." The system. Qi Zhaokai glanced at the entrance of the cemetery, "Never mind, it's not necessary anyways." Qi Zhaokai didn't actually do anything to Yang Beiwa. He got off the car and stood out in the harsh cold wind, facing the cemetery for some time, as if lost in thought. Of course, this place wasn't the famous born in Suhang, buried in Bamang precious feng shui burial ground, it was just an instance of hanging a similar sheep head to sell dog meat. Hung on the gates was a giant, rusty copper lock. Weeds grew abundantly in thick, overgrown patches. Half of the huge copper character had fallen off, leaving behind a single, lonely right ear. Qi Zhaokai stripped off his down jacket, placing it on the hood of the car. Then he took several large steps back from the gates. After he'd made enough space for acceleration, he rushed straight towards the iron gates. He seemed very familiar with the act of scaling walls. When he was about 3 steps away from the iron gates, he jumped. One foot landed precisely on the rusty iron flower carved between the iron gate railings. Using his right hand, he smoothly grabbed hold of the copper character to steady himself. He quickly followed up with his other foot, stepping onto the bar just above the iron gate. With a deft leap, he successfully sent himself over to the ground on the other side of the iron gates. After landing, Qi Zhaokai shook out his ankles. The system asked, "Are you all right?" Qi Zhaokai furrowed his eyebrows, "It's a little numb." The system didn't say anything. He connected Qi Zhaokai's neurons, silently reconnecting his tendons and muscles to smooth out the numbness from the impact, relieving the soreness and numbness in an instant. Qi Zhaokai let out a yee of surprise. He tested his weight on his foot, thinking it recovered very quickly. He didn't think any more of it. After he recovered, he stepped into the weeds that were as high as the tombstones. The system asked, "Why have you come here?" He was extremely scared that Qi Zhaokai would say, "I'm here to pick a spot for Yang Beiwa's grave." Thankfully, Qi Zhaokai's answer could still be considered normal, "I'm looking for someone." The system was curious, "Who?" Qi Zhaokai didn't reply, simply stepping onto a weed that had grown out between a crack in the bricks. In the winter, the grass was very dry. When stepped on it would crack, the sound abnormally loud in the silence of the cemetery. He used his phone flashlight to light the way. Ignoring the rows of gravestones packed tightly together like honeycombs, he directly made his way towards his destination. Very quickly, he stopped. The light from his phone fell on a cheap stone tombstone. The name on the tombstone was Wang Jiangguo. He was born in 1949 and died in 1989 at the age of 40. Qi Xiaokai pushed aside the grass and dust clinging to the tombstone, made a quick bow of respect towards it, and then turned to leave the same way he came. The system tentatively asked, "Who was he to you?" Qi Xiaokai replied, "I don't know him." The system. Qi Xiaokai then said, "Thankfully I don't know him." The system. In order to make scaling the gate easier, Qi Xiaokai had taken off his down jacket. His form-fitting black sweater outlined the beautiful lines of his slender waist and abdomen. His hands were shoved into his pant pockets for warmth, and as he spoke his breath left his mouth as a white cloud. "You mentioned before, in order to facilitate the completion of the task, the first world will be similar to the world I lived in." The system seemed to have realized something. But the person buried there wasn't the person he was looking for. Qi Xiaokai drew out a cigarette from his pocket, and fumbled out his lighter. He analyzed, in this world, Lu Ji might still be alive. The system didn't know who Lu Ji was, but considerately didn't ask further, "Do you want to go look for him?" The system was a little worried about whether Qi Xiaokai would let his personal affairs distract him from his main task. After all, only in the tutorial would the main system assign the host a world similar to their own for practice. After the tutorial, there would be all kinds of strange worlds in their future. If one wanted to find someone, after this village there wouldn't be a shop anymore. No, Qi Xiaokai's mind could still be considered clear, replying, "He's living a good life and he wouldn't know me, why would I go look for him?" Having said this, Qi Xiaokai didn't elaborate further. The system also didn't ask. Qi Xiaokai raised a hand to block the wind as he tried to light the cigarette. But just as the cigarette was about to light, he put his lighter away. The system asked, "Not smoking?" Qi Xiaokai said, "Cheng Yuan has protected his voice for so long. I can't be the one to destroy it." The system didn't speak, simply dialing the warming mode he'd just opened up by another half a notch. When Qi Xiaokai returned to the car, still holding the unlighted cigarette in his mouth, his body hadn't been frozen by the cold wind and was still warm. He thought, this little young master's body wasn't bad, it had a really high cold resistance. As he thought this, Qi Xiaokai bit down on the cigarette filter and started the car. He left the cemetery, slowly driving home. When they passed a soy milk shop, Qi Xiaokai stopped the car and hid the cigarette back in his pocket. Before he drove off to fetch Yang Beiwa, Qi Xiaokai had intentionally taken a look at Cheng Yuan's schedule for today. In particular, he had noted that he needed to stop by the Sun Ji soy milk shop to buy soy milk for his old Yang. This shop's handmade soy milk was made by grindstone, giving it a refined taste. Yang Beiwa really liked it. After Cheng Yuan and Yang Beiwa had become a couple, he'd accompanied him through many breakfast shops and determined his favorite taste of soy milk, gradually forgetting that he himself originally didn't like drinking soy milk. Qi Xiaokai also didn't like to drink soy milk and naturally wouldn't force himself. He bought himself a serving of mung bean porridge, and bought 2 cups of soy milk for Yang Beiwa. As he waited for his order to be packed up, Qi Xiaokai asked the system with a voice full of expectation, "When he drinks these 2 cups of soy milk, how many goodwill points will I get?" The system. This tone was simply as if he was investigating how to raise pigs scientifically. However, Qi Xiaokai had adjusted his mood quite well, so it seemed like what had happened in the cemetery hadn't had too big of an impact on him. By the time Qi Xiaokai returned to the car, the effect of the hypnosis card had worn off and Yang Beiwa had woken up. He was sitting in the back seat fiddling with his phone. Cheng Yuan smiled widely, waving the 2 cups of soy milk in his hands. "I was scared you'd be hungry after waking up, so I bought both these cups for you. In a bit, I'll go buy some steamed buns for you so you can eat your fill." Whilst Yang Beiwa had been sleeping, they'd redeemed 13 of his goodwill points, so originally his attitude towards Cheng Yuan was rather cool, but smelling the fragrance of soy milk, his heart grew warm. When he saw Cheng Yuan's pure smile, his goodwill value increased by 3 points. Good. Xiaochi said to the system, see, 62 points. I passed. The system, as a person you should be more ambitious. He felt like he was an old father, painstakingly advising his idiot son who was already incredibly self-satisfied with his barely passing grades. Xiaochi said, let's set off another firework to celebrate. The system said, don't fuss. Xiaochi said, fine. Add a little sugar to my mung bean porridge, would you? I forgot to add some just now. The system despaired slightly, Mr. Qi, what are you taking the target's goodwill value as? Xiaochi replied confidently, as points, of course. I'm cashing them in only because you said I could. The system. He suddenly felt a little regretful about letting Xiaochi know about the existence of the system shop. The system exchanged 1 goodwill point for half a spoonful of sugar. He placed the spoon into the flexible packaging containing the hot porridge, and even dutifully stirred the sugar in. In the back seat, Yang Beiwa was watching Cheng Yuan in the rearview mirror. He started to speak, before stopping himself, then tried to speak again, before once again stopping himself. Xiaochi let him stew for a while, before putting up a concerned facade. Old Yang, what's wrong? Car sick? Yang Beiwa made up his mind. He leaned forward, asking, have you been busy lately? Yup, I've been busy. Very busy. As he said this, Cheng Yuan's voice was brimming with vitality, and full of coquettish charm. Yang Beiwa asked him, how's your songwriting been going? Originally Cheng Yuan had no shortage of words to say on the subject, but knowing that Yang Beiwa was a staunch man of science and technology, who didn't have much interest in his field, he clamped down on his enthusiasm. I'm writing lyrics now. Yang Beiwa said, Xiao Cheng, I've been meaning to discuss something with you. Go on. Yang Beiwa said, my mom, dad, and third sister will be visiting next week. You're currently busy composing, and my third sister might even be bringing her kid along, so it won't be good if they disturb you. In high spirits, Xiaochi shared his analysis with the system, see that? He's trying to chase me away. The system didn't reply. Xiaochi's words weren't unreasonable. At this time, Yang Beiwa hadn't yet come out to his family. To be precise, even up to when he married a beautiful lady of mixed blood, except for Yang Beiwa's parents and his cousin Xiao Yan, no one would ever know that Yang Beiwa was once gay. In the original timeline, even the big-hearted original host knew that this was just a shallow excuse. They had previously argued because of Cheng Yuan's older brother sending over a car, so they hadn't been in the best of moods. Cheng Yuan had complained, am I that shameful to you, leading into a back and forth, which then escalated into a fierce argument. That night, Yang Beiwa even slept on the sofa. Fortunately, for Yang Beiwa, Cheng Yuan was both big-hearted and didn't hold grudges. Early the next morning, he rolled up onto the sofa wrapped in a quilt and took the initiative to make peace with Yang Beiwa. Holding his phone, he snuggled up against Yang Beiwa's chest and said, look, I can go stay at my classmate's house next week. So don't be angry anymore, okay? After Xiaochi received this world's information and read over this part, he'd thought, little friend, aren't you being a little too naive? If you felt dissatisfied, of course you can express it. But expressing it required careful execution. Cheng Yuan stilled and didn't respond immediately. Uneasy, Yang Beiwa checked Cheng Yuan's expression in the rear-view mirror. Very quickly, Cheng Yuan opened his mouth in a smile, revealing a row of small white teeth. All right. His pinky lightly stroked the leather steering wheel cover. Mom and Dad definitely won't be willing to stay in a hotel since it'd be too expensive. The guest house near our home is also pretty lousy. After having them travel so far in their old age, making them use a public restroom, which can't even guarantee 24 hours of hot water, really wouldn't be very good. After saying so much at once, he looked up and gave Yang Beiwa a slight, reassuring smile in the rear-view mirror. Then he lowered his long lashes, warm, yellow street light from outside the window sliding across his cheek. But our home is only a bedroom and a living room, so when the time comes, Mom and Dad will sleep in the bedroom and you on the sofa. You probably also want to prepare 2 air mattresses for third sister and her children, right? Having finished his spiel, he looked up once more, giving Yang Beiwa in the rear-view mirror a questioning look. But with that one sentence, the rims of Cheng Yuan's eyes had turned faintly red. His eyes were misty and shockingly bright in the light of the street lamps. Discovering he'd lost his composure, Cheng Yuan immediately turned away and coughed, as if trying to hide something. Yang Beiwa's heart skipped a beat. Xiao Cheng. Realizing he'd been found out, Cheng Yuan helplessly looked up at Yang Beiwa once more. He curled his eyes in a gentle smile, trying to show that he was okay. Upon being stared at by such a pair of eyes, Yang Beiwa's heart melted. Cheng Yuan understood his own difficulties, and knew he wasn't ready to come out to his parents. Even though he was clearly upset, he still tried his best to accommodate him. A thread of guilt wrapped around Yang Beiwa's heart. Yang Beiwa said, "Xiao Cheng, I'll find you a hotel to stay in." Cheng Yuan didn't refuse, coquettishly replying with a slightly choked-up voice, I want to stay in a good one, it must be 5 stars. Yang Beiwa was amused, and went along with him, saying, yes, 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 5 stars. The system was amazed. This performance was absolutely perfect. Qi Xiaokai's every micro-expression was amazingly coordinated, and even the changes in the lights and shadows from outside the window had been used to their fullest effect. If this had been in a movie studio, no matter what angle was used to capture it, his expressions would all be perfect. The system had hastily schemed through Qi Xiaokai's information before and knew that before he'd transmigrated, he'd been a model turned actor with an endless amount of black powder. 26 years old, started out as a model, and deep in the quagmire of both fans and anti-fans. According to various data analyses, Qi Xiaokai should have been a star that depended on his face to attract fans and not an actor with talent. But that didn't seem to be the case. The system decided to free up some time to do a thorough check of Qi Xiaokai's background to get through the adjustment period as soon as possible and improve the efficiency of task completion. Compared to his fellow systems, number 061 had always highly valued efficiency when completing tasks. Qi Xiaokai's performance this time was incredibly rewarding. Gratified, he said, system, his goodwill level went up by 15 points, and the regret level went up by 6 points. The system had also received this string of notifications. Good work. Qi Xiaokai, as per the usual, let's redeem a card. The system, since when did this become the usual? Qi Xiaokai, what cards can I get with 15 points? Never mind, tonight when we get back just send me the shop information and I'll flip through it myself. The system, Qi Xiaokai then asked, can I bring unused cards along with me to the next world? The system, you can. Qi Xiaokai was even happier now, that's great. How many cards are available in the shop? If I collect a complete set, will there be a reward? The system couldn't help but remind him, Mr. Qi, we are serious systems, not a card collecting game. Qi Xiaokai said, I like card collecting games. I had a card collecting game on my phone called Summoning Gods and Devils. Out of the 513 heroes, I just needed 6 more to complete the entire set. Having said this, Qi Xiaokai then continued bitterly, but now that this has happened, I don't know how much longer it'll take for that to happen. To a collector like him, this truly was too cruel. The system ignored him. Qi Xiaokai also shrugged indifferently. They were almost at their destination. There were no free parking spaces in the neighborhood, so Chi Xiaokai parked the car by the side of the road outside the neighborhood. When taking out the car keys, Chi Xiaokai turned his head, his gaze falling on Cheng Yuan's reflection in the car window. The corners of his mouth were naturally tilted slightly upwards, just like a lively little sprout nourished by love. No one would have thought that in 3 years, such a happy and simple youth would commit suicide due to a moderate case of depression, slitting his wrists in a little overseas town facing the water. Chapter 4. The plagiarism incident was only the opening act of Cheng Yuan's tragic fate. After Yang Beiwa returned home and finished listening to Cheng Yuan's miserable sobs, he placed his hands on his shoulders, saying, "Xiao Cheng, calm down." Cheng Yuan's eyes reddened. "Old Yang, believe me, you have to believe me." Yang Beiwa said, "Of course I believe you." Cheng Yuan tugged at Yang Beiwa, repeatedly trying to prove himself to him and asking for help. "You saw me write those songs, right? I even let you listen to them, I even." Yang Beiwa took his hand in his and pressed it to his chest. "I know." Cheng Yuan trembled as he leaned into that warm and solid chest, like a someone who had finally found a support in the constantly changing world. As he listened to that ever so close heartbeat, his ears became hot and numb, and he felt as if this was his only safe harbor in the entire world. Now with reassuring support, Cheng Yuan's bloodshot eyes filled with fierce flames. He weakly gnashed his teeth, saying, "I can't just let this go. I want to sue Tang Huan, I want." Yang Beiwa stilled. He stroked Cheng Yuan's back. "Xiao Cheng, you're being too impulsive. You shouldn't be making decisions right now." But Cheng Yuan couldn't care less about that right now. He was suffering from a severe migraine. Before Yang Beiwa had come back he'd taken 2 tablets, but they were slow to take effect. The headache and the anger combined tormented him to the point where his entire body was trembling and he was drenched in cold sweat. "Why? It's my song, I can't just let her steal it and frame me for everything." Yang Beiwa furrowed his eyebrows and pushed him away, raising his voice slightly. "Xiao Cheng, calm down and listen to me. You can't sue her." Cheng Yuan wordlessly opened and closed his mouth. He stared at him, waiting for an explanation. Yang Beiwa sighed deeply. "This matter is Xiao Yan's wrong." Yang Beiwa's younger cousin Yang Xiao Yan had been entrusted to Yang Beiwa by his third uncle when she had been admitted into an average normal university half a year ago. She often came over to Yang Beiwa's house for meals. She was the first one in the Yang family to find out her older cousin's sexual orientation, and often used the excuse of keeping the secret to get Yang Beiwa to treat her to several large meals. All the members of the Yang family had good appearances. Yang Xiao Yan similarly couldn't be considered ugly with a white, neat, melon-shaped face. She liked music, and also liked to compose a few small tunes to publish on the internet since the lyrics she added could arouse the sympathy of beautiful and distressed young girls. She'd even accumulated almost 10,000 fans. This made her rather proud of herself, flaunting herself as a woman of talent. But Cheng Yuan actually didn't really like her. Every time she visited, she'd stick to Cheng Yuan, asking him how much one of his songs could sell for and if he had any connections in the music business. Cheng Yuan didn't like hearing about such things and would just haphazardly wave it off every time. However, Yang Xiao Yan would never get the hint and would even act spoiled with Yang Beiwa, complaining, "Cousin, look, Xiao Chengji's family has connections but he won't even help me out a little. I'm so helpless." Xiao Yan lived in a 4-person dorm and her 3 roommates were all from the city. She refused to lose to them, and would constantly splurge on high-quality makeup and branded clothes. Given these spending habits of hers, of course her money was never enough. She could only frequently search out Yang Beiwa to borrow more, who really gave it every time she asked. He never refused, not even once. Because of this, there was once when he didn't even dare to order anything other than plain rice from the company canteen for an entire month. Seeing this, Cheng Yuan's heart had hurt beyond compare. It was at that time that he'd started learning how to cook. Cheng Yuan stared blankly at Yang Beiwa. He asked, confused, what did you say? Yang Beiwa patiently explained, just now, right after we hung up, Xiao Yan called. Do you remember? Last time when mom, dad and third sister came to visit, you'd went elsewhere to stay. Her phone ran out of battery, so she borrowed my phone to look through Dobayo. As she was flipping through the stores, she accidentally started playing the demo you wrote. She really liked what she heard and asked me if it was you who wrote it, praising you non-stop. Cheng Yuan's eyes widened slightly. Yang Beiwa summoned up his courage and continued, I didn't think too much of it at the time. I told her you wrote it, and that you like to write some songs every once in a while. She just hummed in acknowledgement and went back to playing. I never thought that she would. Cheng Yuan understood. Not daring to believe his own words, he asked, she stole my songs and sold them? You just let her steal them. Don't put it like that, Yang Beiwa said helplessly, I didn't know, and Xiao Yan. She just really likes your songs. She told me that she didn't have enough money and wanted to earn some herself. However, the songs she wrote weren't being accepted by any record labels, so she just wanted to try mixing your songs with hers and sending them in as a test. She never thought that once she sent them in they would all be accepted and the 6 songs would be bought in an instant. Innermost Feelings and Autumn Thoughts were picked up by Tang Huan. She just really likes my songs. Cheng Yuan flared up with rage. She asked me once what I planned on naming my songs. I told her I'd thought up a name for one song in particular and it'd be called Innermost Feelings. He grabbed his phone, turned it on, and showed Yang Beiwa the line from the cover of Tang Huan's album. Old Yang, I ask you, what is this? Did she even copy the name? This is what you call unintentional. You've written so many messy songs and never sent them out. She never thought it would end up like this. Yang Beiwa's tone had become abnormally heavy. He reached out a hand and grabbed Cheng Yuan's wrist. She never thought it'd get so big. When she called me, she was really scared and even cried. Cheng Yuan thought numbly, who cares that she cried? Yang Beiwa painstakingly persuaded, she already knows she was wrong. But she's still young, and you should forgive her. If you sue her and the situation gets even bigger, what will it be like for her at school? How would I explain this to my family? Cheng Yuan's entire life had been smooth sailing up to this point, and never faced any big crisis. This incident was like a sudden landslide. His mind had become completely muddled, and Yang Beiwa's firm tone swayed him. Really? Yes, Yang Beiwa patiently guided him, think about it, since she was young my parents have treated Xiao Yan like their own child. If our relationship is exposed to them because of Xiao Yan's matter and Xiao Yan's reputation is dragged through the mud, then as the main perpetrator, how are they going to accept you? Cheng Yuan hugged his head, curling up into a ball. Why? Cheng Yuan muttered, why? His life's desire, his dream of making music, was ruined. Furthermore, his lover was firmly standing on the side of his family. If he didn't agree to take the responsibility for Xiao Yan, his and Yang Beiwa's future together would be over. His lover or his dream, which one was he supposed to choose? Cheng Yuan had been very obedient since he was young, and other than music, he didn't have any hobbies. Yang Beiwa was the very first person that Cheng Yuan had ever loved like this. To love a person was to carefully place them within your heart, yet fear that your heart wouldn't be soft enough for them. Yang Beiwa was very good and gentle to him. He would coax him when his temper as an artist flared up, he was down to earth, diligent, and they were very compatible in bed. Cheng Yuan couldn't bear to rip open his bloody chest right after experiencing a tempestuous storm that tore his tendons and broke his bones, and forcefully dig out this man who he had loved for 3 years. He couldn't do it. Cheng Yuan grabbed hold of Yang Beiwa's shirt and tugged. He asked softly, with this kind of reputation, how will I write songs? Will there be anyone who still wants me? Yang Beiwa, hearing him give in, unconsciously breathed a big sigh of relief. He pulled Cheng Yuan into his embrace. I want you. This actually wasn't the answer Cheng Yuan had wanted. But this was also the best, and only answer he could get at this stage. Cheng Yuan's company quickly issued a statement severely condemning such vile acts of plagiarism, and even firmly terminated Cheng Yuan's contract while demanding compensation for this breach of contract. At this critical moment, Cheng Yuan's older brother Cheng Jian ran over in a rage, pointing at his younger brother's nose and scolding harshly, "Cheng Yuan, can you endure this? Something this big happened but you still didn't contact your family? If you don't consider yourself a part of the Cheng family, you should say so earlier." Cheng Yuan didn't respond. His reputation had already rotted. Since he'd already decided to cover up the truth, he had to hide everything from even his family. After scolding him, his brother helped him pay the fine, then spent money to delete the posts online. Still frustrated, he even started to fight online personally with the people scolding him. The netizens, noticing that their comments were being deleted, fought back even harder. The situation became more and more heated. Tang Huan's company also hadn't given up on all this free publicity, and started to wantonly buy internet water armies and made marketing posts, boosting the flames from behind the scenes. Amongst them, a particular online singer with over 500,000 fans was the most fierce. He was a famous Tang Huan fan who sent 6 to 7 Weibo posts a day chasing after Cheng Yuan to ridicule him. A particular post said, "The plagiarizing dog probably should be hiding under his bedsheets and trembling in fear now, doge face doge face doge face." Underneath was a mad carnival of Tang Huan fans, their comments full of obscenities horrendous enough to make people feel sick. Cheng Yuan was really scared. He shut off his private messages, shut off his phone, and confined himself in his home. Yang Beiwa was patient with him, but he had just started work and didn't have that much time to accompany him every day. Cheng Yuan thought that after this was over everything would be okay. If he just stuck it out for now, he could still make a comeback. But afterwards, Cheng Yuan found out he could no longer write songs or even touch the piano. The moment he pressed a key he would think of innermost feelings, the piano prelude he had so meticulously composed, and his heart would throb so fast his hands would shake with nausea. He couldn't even play a complete song. After many attempts, he suddenly raised both fists and smashed them onto the piano. The piano let out 2 groans, one high, one low. Cheng Yuan, a genius who had, in college, single-handedly propped up an entire orchestra, couldn't even play Ode to Joy anymore. That day, he collapsed to the floor and cried for a very long time. After Yang Beiwa got back, he hugged him and comforted, "If you can't write, it's fine. I'll take care of you." Yang Beiwa remained as gentle as he always was, as if what Cheng Yuan was going through wasn't anything big and that he would stay with him and stick it out together with him. But Cheng Yuan became more and more abnormal. He would often spend entire days just sitting by the bed not knowing what to do, even a bit of sunshine would frighten him, he spent long periods of time refusing to eat and then overeating, he often forgot where he put his keys and wallet, and the notes on the table had been left without an update for a long time. He knew he was sick, but when he told everything to Yang Beiwa, the man just replied, "You're just in a bad mood, as long as you go out more often you'll be fine." After more than 3 months, the Cheng Jian who'd had a big quarrel with his younger brother couldn't hold back any longer and sneakily ran over to visit him. Seeing his younger brother who'd thinned to the point of becoming almost unrecognizable, Cheng Jian had a shock and dragged him off to see a psychiatrist. When Cheng Jian took Cheng Yuan's diagnosis of moderate clinical depression to show to their parents, their mother burst into tears on the spot. Their healthy son had become like this. Their father immediately made an attempt to contact Yang Beiwa's parents, planning on asking what they thought. It wasn't until they met with the shocked faces of Yang Beiwa's parents did Cheng Yuan's parents realize, from the beginning till now, Yang Beiwa had never mentioned to his family about him being in a relationship with a man for the past 3 years. Cheng Yuan's parents' attitude was very clear, the environment within the country wasn't good, so they wanted to send Xiao Yuan to a small, quiet town abroad, where there was a hospital that specialized in treating depression, to rest. Given how sick Xiao Yuan had become, he couldn't leave Yang Beihua, so Yang Beihua was allowed to come along. His work visa or immigration papers would be handled by the Cheng family. That small town was in Europe, where same-sex marriage had been legalized more than 10 years ago. From Cheng Yuan's parents' actions, it could be said that they made a great concession for their son. Cheng Yuan's parents originally thought that Yang Beihua's parents would oppose it and had already prepared a whole string of arguments to persuade them, but after going home to discuss it for a night, Yang Beihua's parents agreed the very next day. Cheng Yuan and Yang Beihua immigrated over together. In their second year overseas, Cheng Yuan's illness took a turn for the better. He could play the piano again. When he sat down on the piano bench once more, his smile was just like that of a young child. "Old Yang, what song do you want to listen to? I'll play it for you." That year, they got their marriage certificate and had a simple wedding in a church. In the third year, Yang Beihua made great progress with his career. He proposed immigrating his parents over. Cheng Yuan agreed. In the fourth year, Yang Beihua became more and more busy. One day when he came home, Cheng Yuan found that his shirt wasn't the same one as the one he had worn when he had left yesterday. Cheng Yuan started taking medicine again. He didn't know how to ask Yang Beihua about it, and more importantly, he didn't want to know the answer. As for Yang Beihua's parents, they were always indifferent towards him. Their attitude towards him couldn't be considered bad, but it couldn't be considered good either. Even though they were all living under the same roof, they tended to not speak more than 2 sentences to each other every day. Yang Beihua was too busy, so Cheng Yuan just spent his days at home with 2 elderly people he couldn't speak to. He was desperately lonely. However, he didn't want to let his parents worry about him, so every time his parents called he would always force out his most brilliant smile and say to them, "I'm doing great, you don't need to worry." Actually, he wasn't doing very well. After he relapsed he kept wanting to die, but at the same time he didn't dare to die. He was scared of wronging his parents and hurting Yang Beihua, so for them, he tried his best to live and tried his best to stand up from the quagmire. He wasn't afraid of being covered in muddy water himself. He only feared accidentally dirtying the people he cared about. This lasted until one day, Yang Beihua took a day off work. Cheng Yuan had planned on taking the car to the supermarket 2 kilometers away to buy groceries, but returned because he'd forgot his wallet, and inadvertently overheard the conversation between Yang Beihua and his mother at the kitchen door. Yang Beihua's mother complained, "You don't understand, Xiao Cheng is like a gourd that's had its mouth sawed off, it's a miracle if he speaks more than 5 sentences in 2 days." Even after so many years, Yang Beihua's tone was still just as gentle. "Xiao Cheng doesn't like talking, Mom, don't be angry at him." Cheng Yuan lowered his head in embarrassment. Actually, he used to love talking. As he thought this, he tiptoed over to the table to get his wallet. Just as he turned around to leave, he heard Yang Beihua's mother say behind him, "We've all already gotten our immigration visas ready, when are you going to leave him?" Cheng Yuan. His neck turned stiff. He lowered his head, blankly staring at the floor before his feet, waiting for Yang Beihua's answer. Yang Beihua was silent. Cheng Yuan felt his silence like a vice around his throat, choking him so hard he couldn't breathe. Yang Beihua's mother continued, "Being together with a man, and unable to have a child together isn't normal. Your father and I have had to lie to our relatives, saying you're working overseas, and everyone's praising you for your prospects. 2 days ago, your uncle called, asking your father to bring back some Western tobacco and wine. He even asked after you, asking if you found a foreign wife and had a foreign kid. Tell me, how am I supposed to respond to that?" Her words were like knives, stabbing themselves one by one into Cheng Yuan's body. His entire body started trembling uncontrollably, and his stomach twisted with pain. He bent over slightly, hugging his waist that had already slimmed to the length of a sheet of paper, pressing as hard as possible. You'd be able to accept a foreign daughter-in-law. Half a moment later, Yang Beiwa's warm voice resounded once more. Some time ago, a new woman entered our company, and she's Chinese. She and I get along really well. In the midst of her satisfaction, Yang Beiwa's mother thought of another problem. What are you going to say to Xiao Cheng? This time, Yang Beiwa's silence lasted even longer. Cheng Yuan didn't wait to hear Yang Beiwa's answer, but he also didn't let Yang Beiwa be troubled for too long. That night, in the piano room, he slit open his wrists with a utility knife. So, in the beginning when Xiaochi wanted to run Yang Beiwa over with the car, he was being entirely sincere. Yang Beiwa liked Cheng Yuan, but in the end, it was only like. His goodwill level of 72 points was only 13 points away from the passing mark of indifference. His like was ultimately only worth a card, and a firework. Xiaochi returned home with Yang Beiwa. The living room table was covered with newspapers. Occasionally, the sound of Yang Beiwa on the phone drifted over from the other room. Xiaochi changed into casual clothes. He then went into the kitchen, rolled up his sleeves, and got started on the unwashed dishes that had been piling up for 2 days. When he was relaxed, Xiaochi usually had an absent-minded expression. He stood in front of the sink clogged with pieces of leftover vegetables, his eyes half-lidded. He let the water slide down his long, slender, white fingers, his posture languid and peaceful, exuding a noble air and perfectly complementing young Master Cheng's identity. But his dishwashing technique was abnormally well practiced, not at all like a person whose 10 fingers had never been stained by the sun or touched by spring water. The system asked him, "You know how to wash dishes?" Xiaochi replied, deadly earnest, "I even know how to cook." The system didn't believe him. After all, whenever Xiaochi seemed serious, he usually wasn't. Because in the next second he asked with that same earnest look on his face, "Right, does the shop sell rat poison?" "No," the system snapped. He now harbored the suspicion that Xiaochi was so enthusiastically doing housework just so he could scout the scene of his future crime. Xiaochi said, "There's something I want to ask." The system was expressionless. "Oh." Xiaochi suggested, "Could you do an inventory check? Your customer requires it." The system said, "Cannot." Xiaochi said, "Rat poison." The system, "Dare I ask if that rat just so happens to weigh 130 jin, and also happens to be surnamed Yang?" The system wasn't able to bear it any longer. "Mr. Qi, don't you have any less violent solutions?" "I do have one." Xiaochi leisurely wiped off the clean dishes with a dry cleaning cloth and placed them back on the shelf. At last, he finally said something normal, "Tomorrow, I'm going to go visit Cheng Yuan's older brother. The author has something to say. You see that person? Their mouth says they love me, but they still let me be so upset. The 35 years I waited for you." Chapter 5. When the dishes were done, Xiaochi didn't leave the kitchen. He continued to call for the system, "System, system." The system said, "We don't sell rat poison." Xiaochi. The system then continued, "We also don't sell sleeping pills and weed killer." Xiaochi comforted him, "Don't be scared, I was just going to ask about the hypnosis cards." The system, "How long-lasting do you want them to be, and what effect do you want?" Xiaochi, "How long-lasting can they be, and what effects do they have?" The system said, "Like with the other cards, hypnosis cards are split into 3 grades, low, medium and high. The difference is in the effect duration. Low-grade ones last 60 minutes, mid-grade ones last 90 minutes, and the high-grade one's duration is customizable but cannot exceed 6 hours. "That works," Xiaochi said, 2 cards, 1 high-grade, and 1 low-grade. 14 points. Xiaochi didn't hesitate, "Done." The system didn't immediately make the exchange. "What do you want these hypnosis cards for?" Chi Xiaokai replied bluntly, I'm worried about that surnamed Yang going into heat. The system expressed his understanding. Chi Xiaokai was his 11th host. Almost everyone had raised similar concerns to System 061 in the first world. After all, in every world, most of the original hosts had some relationship with the target, and the public grain still needed to be dispensed. His first 10 task takers had all circled around the target, basically never breaking away from the original plotline. They would only use the original plotline to avoid pitfalls when appropriate, expressing all kinds of goodwill to the target. When the goodwill level of the target reached 100, they would fake their deaths and leave the world. Most of the time at this point, the regret level of the target would reach its peak. Out of so many task takers, Chi Xiaokai was the only brave person willing to break away from the original plotline in the very first world. But on the issue of public grain, his attitude was extremely resolute, shockingly stubborn. The system said, we provide free evacuation services. At such times, when intimate relations were about to occur, they would extract the host's consciousness and awareness from the original host's body, minimizing the discomfort of the task taker. Leaning against the fridge, Chi Xiaokai lightly pinched the bridge of his nose. That's not the problem. The system thought of a possibility. You object to the position. Chi Xiaokai let out a single scornful laugh. I object to the person. The system, Yang Beiwa. Chi Xiaokai tilted his head. Don't make me insult him. The system understood. He said, all right. Then you'll be using the low-grade hypnosis card on him today. Use both. Despite saying this, Chi Xiaokai then continued, first use the low-grade hypnosis card to put him to sleep. It's already night anyways, if no accidents occur, he'll stay asleep for the entire night. The system asked, the other card? Chi Xiaokai answered, use it on me. The system paused. Chi Xiaokai closed his eyes, using Cheng Yuan's face to let out a smile that was purely Chi Xiaokai's, frivolous, careless, and containing a little self-mockery. Or do you guys have any sleeping pills for sale? A second later, a mechanical voice sounded, number 61 to 101 has login permissions, request approved. Immediately after that, the originally stable streams of data suddenly started to go out of control, flowing madly like a waterfall, glowing as brilliantly as starlight. The waterfall-like sheets of starlight gradually filtered into brilliant bodies of light, forming physical entities. Under the flowing light curtain, a man in a white shirt and black pants appeared. He stood barefoot in a spacious, tall, domed hall, surrounded by a crowd of people in similar clothing milling around him. A few people recognized him, greeting him familiarly, 061, you've come. Did you pick up a new host? 061 answered, N. Didn't you only just finish up with one? It's only been 2 universal days, why don't you take 10 days or half a month off to reward yourself? No time, 061 replied. The person asking was number 666, a newcomer. Hearing this, he asked, confused, no time. What are you rushing for? 061 didn't answer. He stared at the ground, slightly perplexed, as if trying his hardest to remember something. Next to them, another young man with an elegant nose and deep eyes seemed to understand. He frowned slightly, then gave 666 a meaningful glance. Changing the subject, he asked 061, what did you come back here for? 061 said, I'm looking for 023. He recently moved offices. You should head southwest and look for room 1008. 061 smiled. 061 had the appearance of a refined and gentle young man. Straight-backed, eyes bright with stars, when he smiled, he was like the early morning sunlight reflecting off snow, looking very approachable. Thanks. After saying his goodbyes and walking off a fair distance away, he could still hear 666 complaining, don't even mention that host of mine to me. What else is good about that guy aside from having a big and lively dick? He holds on with a death grip, refusing to let go, and he used up all the condoms in the shop. The man found the southwestern room 1008 and knocked on the door. Only after a long wait, did he hear a chilly "Please come in." He opened the door and entered. As he pushed open the door, the insides of the room loaded in. The surrounding light dispersed, before gathering together once more, coalescing into a giant, human brain-shaped quantum computer. On closer inspection, the flowing neurons and peristaltic synapses in the brain were all bytes orbiting in a sea of data. This was the main God system's brain, which connected the databases of various worlds. A teenager with snow-white skin sat in front of the giant quantum computer, two long, slender, silvery white data cables laid out on the table before him. He was playing Tetris on an old-fashioned video game console, his pale fingernails moving like lightning over the red and green controller buttons. He had albinism, so his hair and skin were all the same shade of white. 061 said, 023, it's me. 023 didn't raise his head. He let out a single "oh," followed by, "you again." He successfully eliminated a few more lines of blocks, making the console in his hands ring out with consecutive diddy noises of blocks disappearing. 061 stepped into the room, standing barefoot on the matte ceramic tiles, patiently waiting for him to finish his game. As he played, 023 asked, "What did you come here for?" 061 said, "I want to download a few movies." 023 held up his console, "Ah." 061. Operating the game console with a single hand, he picked up the data cables on the table with the other. The thin plug of the data cable morphed in shape as it approached his temple. Cobweb-thin silver filaments extended from the top of the cable, intertwining as they entered his temple, connecting directly to his brain. Soon after, dense strings of binary code flashed across 023's eyes. 023 shot out, "Serial number." 061, "What damned serial number?" He answered, "All the movies Xiaochi has acted in." Hearing these 8 words, the teenager who had been engrossed in his game suddenly looked up, as if he had seen a ghost. His finger flexed involuntarily, activating fast drop. By the time he noticed and tried to salvage the situation in a panic, "Game over" had already filled the screen. 023 swore, then tossed the video game console back onto the table. He turned towards 061, arms crossed, "Your new host? What are you downloading all his movies for?" 061 said, "And everything else we have on him." "What do you want those for?" 061 said, "To deepen my understanding of him, to facilitate faster completion of tasks." 023's snow-white brows furrowed tightly, as if discontent. 061, "Let me remind you, don't get too close to your hosts. You have no idea how dirty humans' hearts are. If you don't want to be reformatted again, do as I say. Don't disobey the rules laid down by the main god." 061 knew 023 meant well. When he was on his 8th host, he was reported once by his own host and was punished with a reformatting. After being forcibly reformatted, 061 forgot a lot of things, even forgetting the very reason he'd been reported. His database only retained some basic information about past tasks. This didn't have too much of an impact on 061. He was still the most excellent employee of the year, and his diligence and efficiency still left all the other systems behind in the dust. It was just that even he didn't remember the reason behind his diligence anymore. He seemed to have been in a hurry to catch an appointment, to find a person. But as to who that person was, their name, or even where to look for them, that information had all become fragmented garbage data. 061 said, "This is the 15th time you've reminded me. If you don't want to be destroyed, just do your job well." 023 said, "It's the 16th time now, I've made it an auspicious number. No need to thank me." 061 good-naturedly rubbed the tip of his nose, are you done downloading the movies yet? 023, it's done. Check your inbox. So fast. 023 knocked on his forehead, falling silent for a moment. I've downloaded it before, it was still saved in the database. 061 was curious, It was someone who'd come from the same world as Xiaochi, they were one of his brainless fans. 023's words carried a slight undertone of hating iron for not becoming steel. They downloaded every single one of Xiaochi's movies. Their entire life just revolved around him, really immature. 061 didn't think anything of it. He pulled out a cartridge from his chest and tossed it to 023. Pac-Man, produced in 1983, 061 said, "Thanks for your help." 023 was as if he had gained the most precious treasure. He used his sleeve to give the cartridge a quick clean, trying his best to stop his mouth from grinning and hide his happiness. "I suppose you do have a conscience." 061 said, "Help me out with another thing." Having gotten a present, 023 was in a much happier mood. "What?" When 061 said his request, blue veins bloomed on 023's forehead. "Do you have any idea how troublesome that is?" 061 gave a slight bow, expressing his request. Gazing at the cover of his new game cartridge, 023 casually waved his hand. Got it, got it. I don't have any problem with helping, but this is too difficult to locate, so I definitely can't get it to you by today. 2 days is also fine." 023 pulled the data cable out of his head and picked up his console once more. "Okay, if there's nothing else, then let this Imperial Court session adjourn." 061 warmly laughed, "As your Majesty orders." Walking to the door, 061 stopped and turned around to ask, "By the way, 023, does the shop stock rat poison?" 023 raised his eyebrows. "Ha!" 061 coughed lightly, "Just a casual question." Xiaochi spent the night sleeping while the system spent it watching movies. When the effects of the hypnosis card wore off, Xiaochi promptly woke up. The system checked the time. "It's only 5 a.m., the sun hasn't risen. You should sleep a little longer." Xiaochi got up, leaving Yang Beiwa alone on the bed. He walked over to the piano bench in the living room and sat down. "After waking up, I can't fall back asleep." With this piano, the originally decently sized living room became rather cramped. Xiaochi ran his hands absently over the piano cover, lost in thought. It was unknown what exactly was on his mind. The system took the initiative to start chatting with him. "The shop doesn't stock any rat poison." Xiaochi lifted up the piano lid. "You actually remembered?" "I was just kidding." He silently stroked the black and white piano keys, feeling the raging creative impulse and endless inspiration in his body. It was an unique treasure solely belonging to Cheng Yuan, which had been stripped down until there was practically nothing left because of Yang Beiwa, who still disparaged it as being superfluous. "A mouthful of rat poison, and that's the end of it?" "That's letting him off too easy," Xiaochi said. "If he didn't get to personally experience everything Cheng Yuan had to go through, wouldn't that be too unfair?" Upon waking up, Yang Beiwa wanted to pull Cheng Yuan into his arms and bask in their shared warmth for a while, but he'd woken up somewhat late and didn't have any more time to rub their heads together. He could only give Cheng Yuan a hurried hug before rushing out the door with his computer. Before heading out, he grabbed the keys of their new car, saying, "I'm going to see a client at noon, so no need to send me lunch today. I'll buy dinner for us tonight, your favorite braised chicken liver." "Right, don't forget to eat breakfast." The good thing about Yang Beiwa was that he was truly a tender person. He'd never lost his temper at Cheng Yuan before. During those years when Cheng Yuan was suffering from depression, he was still as good-tempered as ever, still indulging and spoiling Cheng Yuan as he always had, as if nothing could ever make him truly angry. To put it bluntly, as long as Cheng Yuan's interests didn't conflict with those of his family, he would have been able to forever continue to treat him so tenderly. Right after Yang Beiwa's foot stepped out the door, Chi Xiaokai followed on his heels. He'd checked the route ahead of time and got on the bus to Cheng Xian's company. Cheng Yuan really got motion sickness. The long, bumpy ride made him sick to his stomach. He could only hug the grab pole in a death grip, unable to even speak. The moment the bus reached his stop, he immediately rushed off and found the nearest trash bin. He began to retch incessantly, vomiting till his small face turned pale. The system originally wanted to help him adjust, but suddenly thought of something and held back. Instead, he just helped him by lowering his heart rate to alleviate some of his internal discomfort. Chi Xiaokai easily straightened back up. He wiped away the involuntary tears that had formed in the corners of his eyes and took out his phone. Facing the entire office building occupied by the Cheng family company, he dialed a phone number. His eyes were red and his small face was deathly white as he smiled. "Gee, it's me. If you're not busy, come down for a bit."